Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to talk about giving your kids advice. And this is something that a lot of parents struggle with in today's child-centered society, and I will talk about why as soon as I tell you to subscribe. My most recent subscriber episode was Stop with the Solution Hunting. And this magic pill seeking is something that, and I don't just mean a regular pill, but sometimes that too, this is something that plagues people and really stops you from a deeper life acceptance and kind of an understanding of the world, like wisdom. It stops wisdom from happening when you're always trying to find a solution to everything. And I'll tell you more about what I think about that idea. Some may say it's unusual for therapists to say that, but certainly I feel it is the real advice and the real work that people need to do versus just what is PC to offer a constant stream of potential solutions for everything. And so you get that and many, many more episodes if you subscribe, hundreds more, in fact. Okay, so a lot of parents struggle with giving their kids advice. And this is particularly as the kids get older, so like teenage years and up. So a little kid, they'll say, stuff like, oh, I think, you should, pick this instrument maybe. Although, as I'm saying it, I know that they don't. The more anxious parents will not even opine whether their child should pick a clarinet or a tuba. Even if it's like this tiny little kid, they can't carry a tuba. It's like a terror. It's a terror of saying anything that could potentially divert this child's what's thought of as their pure, unfettered choice, their self-actualization. Like you can't even barely get a parent to say, like, you have to do anything. This is not every parent, but this is a subset of particularly well-educated, well-off parents who really seem to fetishize the idea of the child's self-actualization to a degree that is not helpful. And I see these people as adults, and they say things like, my parent never taught me anything. My parent, I don't know what they actually think about anything. They just let me do whatever I wanted. And this is really permissive parenting. And permissive parenting is linked with worse outcomes than even authoritarian parenting. Because at least with authoritarian parenting, which the best one is authoritative, that's warm but firm. But if you got to pick between the strict authoritarian and the laissez-faire permissive, then the strict, at least the kid doesn't end up doing drugs, right, and out all night and failing out of school. So, in terms of real world outcomes, there are real world outcomes. And so if you have, for example, no curfew, then you're going to get in trouble at a higher rate than a kid who does have a curfew. You may hate your parents if they give you too stringent a curfew, but you are less likely to end up on drugs, so there's always a push and pull there. But either way, I see parents that will not ever give advice. They won't barely say what they prefer, even at all. So instead of, let's say, the kid going to a concert that they, the parent, like, they will only go to concerts the kid likes. Instead of listening to the music they like on the radio, they'll only listen to the music the kid likes. In terms of books, they won't say, read this book, I loved it. It's whatever. They're Googling books that the child could possibly to tweak their interest, at all, and to pique their interest. I don't know where I got tweak. Maybe I'm talking about drugs too much. But the point is the parent will not ever give a value judgment. They will barely give a preference. I mean, these kids and listen, kids are looking for advice. They're kids. That's evolutionary. They know they're not on top. They know that they're not the smartest person in the world. They may act like that as an adolescent, but they truly do not think they are. That's why they listen to teachers so much. If they love a teacher, they'll get so into the teacher or a professor or a mentor on the job. I work with people that are so smart, so successful. Other young adults would pay to get advice from them. And then their own children, they won't give advice to. Because God forbid they should divert the brilliance, the prospective self-actualization of this child. And it's crazy because you are this resource that if you have a good relationship with your child, they should respect you. Even if you don't have a good relationship, they probably respect you to some degree and love you to some degree, right? And yet you will not give them the things that you really think. it's been so long since I've heard, and I used to hear this more, of parents who would pick like what was on TV. You know, they were in the game. Now it's just, if they're going to watch a movie night or TV with the kids pick it 100% of the time. And what does that teach a child? It teaches them to be very narcissistic, certainly, which I talk about frequently in my work, but also it doesn't teach them anything about anything that happened before them. It doesn't give them a sense of the world. There's so many kids who haven't even watched a movie that came out before they were alive. That's crazy, right? There's this whole, there's all of history, all of pop culture. And there are many kids that will never get exposed to it in their home. And then ironically, they'll go to college, they'll take like a film class on, films from the 80s. You know who else could have shown you films from the 80s, like your parent who was born in the 80s. And so it's interesting because especially people that love to mentor on the job and love to talk to young adults, and then with their own, they're like walking on eggshells. And why does this happen? Well, first of all, there's this complete, this bowing down to whatever the kid wants. And why, though? What's the core thing? The core is anxiety and fear. It's fear that eventually the child will fail. But if it was your idea and they fail, then it will be your fault. So you are doing what a lot of women ironically blame their husbands for doing. They say, well, you don't make any choices. You're so passive. You don't make any choices. So then anything that I choose, if it's my fault, I have to own it. That's why you don't make any choices, because you don't want to have to own it if things go poorly. And that is a very good point, and one that I talk to men and women about, is owning your own choices and dealing with it if there's an outcome that you don't like. That's being a fully engaged human being and partner versus just letting the other person make all the decisions. And therefore, when something goes wrong, it's always 100% of the time their fault because you never own any decisions, right? And that's not fair. But it's the same thing that parents of both genders do with the children. They're so terrified that it will go down the wrong way in history. Well, mom advised that I major in math, and I hated math. And that's when I started to have chronic, horrible depression. It's all because of mom's suggestion that I major in math. And it's a catastrophizing way to think about things. And it's also very selfish, because to get yourself out of potential later trouble, if your kid, struggles with depression, their own choice of major may just be as bad, right? Because it's probably never going to be the major. So, and it's very infrequent that a child blames the parent to a huge degree when there isn't already a very bad relationship, right? If there is a bad relationship already, work on creating more positive moments, more bonding, no pressure, fun activities where you hang out together and you say nice things. I have my podcast on the love versus chip style of talking to your adult children. And be very positive if your relationship is really terrible. And don't give advice, right? But most people are not in that scenario. They have a relatively good relationship with their teenager or young adult, but they are still terrified of somehow giving them the wrong advice, which is anxiety. Now, the kid doesn't have to take your advice. And so that's the key that I always talk to people about, is throw your hat in the ring. Don't let everybody else in the world give them advice. Then they're just going to do whatever their English teacher tells them to major in because they love their English teacher, right? You don't even have a say. That you don't care. So many people, ironically, you do care and you love them so much, but it's perceived as you don't care, because the same as the guy who will never pick where he goes on date night with his wife. She feels that he doesn't care about the relationship because he's not putting himself out there at all to try to make a suggestion to see how it goes. And so when children grow up, they say, my dad didn't really care. I say, did your father's a doctor? Did he want you to be a doctor? And they'll say, I have no idea. He would never say something like that to me. And they don't say it with love, They don't say, it was so great that dad had absolutely no input on anything that I did, but yet he paid and he smiled, No, what they want is for the parent to say something like, I'm a doctor and I think you'd be good at being a doctor. You don't have to, But I think it's something you would do. Or I'm a doctor, and honestly, these are the things that I don't like about it. And here's how I think that would be with your personality. So, I don't actually advise you to be a doctor. Unless, of course, you want to, then go ahead, right? So there is a way to give advice where you're not saying, and I won't love you, if you don't take this advice, right? And that's what parents can be scared that the child will hear, is that they'll say, oh, I think you should major in math. You're so good at math, and then the child will hear, and if you don't major in math, I will hate you. And I will, wish that I had a different child who did major in math. No, that's not what they hear unless you set it up that way. The point is people will give all this advice to, like I said, just random people at work that they're mentoring, younger people, friends, colleagues. They'll actually care. They'll say, here's an idea. And then with their kids, they won't even say, here's an idea. They're waiting for somebody who's like 10 years old to say, this is the sort of literature that I most prefer. No. It's like crazy. You tell them, I observe you. People want to feel known and loved. You can't really feel loved in a deep way without feeling known. And if nobody has a suggestion for you about what they think about you, then it can be seen as that you're not known. Right? Because the kid doesn't say, well, dad's actually so deeply anxious that I won't ever love him that he refuses to tell me what he thinks about me being a doctor or not. No, they say dad didn't really give a shit. He wasn't that interested. He wasn't that involved, and so I don't know, and so try to engage in a very different way and see how it goes. Make a small suggestion, a small piece of advice. Oh, you would really like this book. I think you would like this book. And if the kid doesn't like the book, then you could talk about it. If the kid won't read the book, oh well. But, there are people who won't even recommend a book because they do not want the minor level of anxiety that they would feel about having put something on their kid's plate that their kid is going to do that they don't particularly like to do, that they wasted their child's time or in some kind of a way, or that they're going to be seen as like the person who gave me the bad book. Really. And this is a problem in the culture. This is a problem of emphasizing the child's wants at the expense of, everything else. The child's wants come before everything. And that is not a productive way to have a relationship, and it does not make the child feel known. And it prevents the child from getting what could be very good advice because you're an expert on your child, just like they're an expert on you. You've been living with them for their whole life. And so you do have good points, and try to make more of them. Now, if you're on the other side of the spectrum, your child's always like, you're giving me so much advice, stop. Well, then you just got some feedback, right? And so work on that. And that could be an anxious thing too, the constant stream of advice and feedback, because you're so scared of your child making the wrong decision. But then, of course, you end up cutting them off at the knees, and then they feel that you don't believe in them, and that you do not think that they can make a good decision on their own. So that's the other side of the coin for people that struggle with too much advice. But I much more often in my practice now see the problem of too little advice than the problem of too much advice. So if this resonated with you, it would be a good one to talk to your spouse about, to talk to your therapist about, whatever, to journal about, and to really try out small ways of giving a bit of advice and seeing how it goes. A lot of kids are interested and they feel loved, and they do read the book and they say it was good, or they don't say it was good, but at least it's a discussion point. And they feel that you have more skin in the game and that they know you more. And I'm going to link to my podcast episode, Being Yourself Around Your Kids, a novel idea in today's child-centered society. So many people, because they don't share their movies, their books, their thoughts, their advice, their kids don't really feel like they know them, and they don't really feel like their kids know them. And there's kind of this disconnect where it's this really imbalanced unilateral relationship where everything is about every little thought that the child has, but the child knows none of the parents' real thoughts. And that is not a genuine and vulnerable and real relationship between two human beings. All right, thanks for listening, guys, and subscribe for more episodes. And if you ever need a therapist or a coach, reach out to us, info@bestlifebehavioralhealth.com. We have great people, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Have a great day.